Hello.
Our story begins on the ancient Jedi homeworld of Ahch-To. Rey and Ben were just ending their Force-time interaction with each other. Snoke may have been the one bridging the gap between these two powerful Force users of this era, but they were under the belief that they were being brought together by the Force itself. After all, Rey and Ben filled a need that the other had. She and he desired someone to trust and confide in. Their respective masters were unreliable at best or borderline abusive. They found each other in their most desperate hours, and their connection here, inside this small hut, was everything to them. Ben longed for someone to join him in a crusade to abandon the past, to forget everything that came before, and abandon the legacy that felt pre-written for him. Rey, after being abandoned on Jakku by her parents and losing her first father figure she'd found since she was 5, was only trying to find belonging with Luke. He was neglectful, jaded, and wanted no part in the fight. Now she found someone who respected her for her. Ben wasn't condescending, and Rey wasn't incapable. They were both everything the other could benefit from. When their interaction ended, with the physical touch of their hands with each other, they from across the stars felt drawn towards one another. Ben had to return to being Kylo Ren until the Resistance was destroyed, and he'd wait for her. Rey, though, would take the Millennium Falcon to the unending fleet chase to save Ben from the dark side. They both wanted the other in their lives, but they also wanted different things for their equal in the Force. As Rey gathered her materials together, Luke entered the hut unannounced. This followed a deleted scene in which Master Skywalker taught Rey the third lesson, being that the Resistance needed someone willing to do the right thing, regardless of how it affects the Force, i.e., real change and real hope doesn't come from a dusty old religion, but by people determined to act. In a way, it was meant to inspire her, as well as teach her that the Jedi weren't the end-all be-all of good in the galaxy, but it left her heartbroken because the lesson was formed in an almost mocking way. He used a party of the local inhabitants of the planet that looked like a raid to teach her about action, but she confronted him about their real friends dying, and no one being able to do anything to stop it. She and Ben having this moment gave Rey another sense of urgency. Not that she hated Luke or the Jedi Order, but that she would act regardless of Luke's decision to remain complacent. And that's where she was now, looking at the age-old Jedi Master after years of silence in Ahch-To, coming to the conclusion that wishing for the Jedi Order to be destroyed wouldn't change anything. As Yoda would have told him if he hadn't come to Rey, failure is the greatest teacher, and Luke needed to embrace his greatest mistake. The Jedi aren't infallible, and neither are people. That, in many ways, was the beauty of the Jedi Order. They were to aspire to be the best of the galaxy, but that didn't mean that they couldn't fall down. Luke broke himself down so much because he believed he created the next Vader, when all the while he should have embraced the hope that he could bring to the galaxy. He apologized to Rey for having let her down as an instructor, while also confirming that even if he didn't agree with facing down the whole First Order with a laser sword, he'd give it a shot, just to see where it would get them. It was a humorous moment, giving Rey a chance to see Luke for who he always had been. It was hard for Skywalker to accept that his time had passed. He no longer was the young, energetic hero to save the day. Luke had become his first teacher. Luke Skywalker, very much so, was now Ben Kenobi. That was his role. Just embracing that here, with Rey, was the first step Luke needed to take. And while things would have gone so much differently if Luke had seen Ben Solo inside the hut, he didn't see him. So without a post-traumatic stress response, the two of them were off to the Resistance to stop the First Order from destroying them. Thanks to the tracker Finn took from Leia and gave to Poe, the Millennium Falcon would make its way back to the Resistance with ease. And yes, Luke would learn that even though he saw no value in an old pile of books, Rey did. And the ancient Jedi texts were actually inside the Millennium Falcon for future reading endeavors. It was a really nice moment for Luke to see what kind of student he would end up having if he took more time to train Rey. But there was one little benefit from their short stint on Ahch-To. Master Skywalker, in all of his years of instruction, understood how to break the Force down in a more digestible way. Rey understood, to a degree, more than Luke did on Dagobah because Luke was able to communicate the waves of the Force in a clearer direction. It was something he prided himself on at his academy on Ossus. Once the Falcon dropped out of hyperspace, there'd be no pod drop. Instead, Chewie would allow the vessel to be tractor beamed into the Supremacy. Luke and Rey would be captured, with R2 and Chewbacca reminiscing about their time on the Death Star inside the Falcon storage compartment under the floorboards. Kylo was so eager to see Rey and deal with Luke that he didn't even consider the fact that Chewie might have been piloting the ship. It took all of his strength, but Ben did not lash out at his former master, and he especially did not take it out on Rey, bringing him here. He might have been a dark acolyte, but Leia raised him better. The trio entered the throne room of the Supremacy to the delight of Supreme Leader Snoke. The seemingly ancient Force user was so pleased to see his star pupil succeed for once. This was their chance to snuff out the Jedi Order and ensure their religion remained dead, just as Master Skywalker wanted. Rey was already antsy, looking for a way to grab the Skywalker saber, but Luke was here for a verbal spar. Unbeknownst to them, far away from Crait and the Supremacy, the old Sith Lord was watching. Palpatine wanted to see how successful Snoke's attempts to destroy the Jedi were going, and by seeing Luke, he decided to listen in, without manipulating his clone, as he did with Snoke when he seduced Ben to the dark side. Luke, embodying this Ben Kenobi-like persona, didn't start with action. He stepped in front of Rey to protect her, with chains on his wrists, and told Snoke and Kylo that the dark would never win. Even the Sith knew when their time was. After waiting for this glorious match, Snoke verbally sparred with Luke, telling him that the Sith were fools and he was no Sith. Snoke learned enough from the Jedi and the Sith to know that if he wanted true power in the galaxy, that he needed to eradicate both religions and start anew. Ironically, despite Kylo Ren having very similar aspirations, his included a universe without Snoke and his Inferno monologuing. Rey and Kylo, though, kept their eyes on one another, playing eye tag if you will. He could see her searching for a weapon to use for herself, and he was waiting for his master to give him a direction. Because Luke was here, Ben wouldn't just be throwing himself at Rey, in the hopes that she would see his path and join it. Luke was an obstacle in the way of that, and he needed to die first. Luke, understanding Ben and what continuously ailed him, told Snoke to let his star pupil fight for his right to become that new Vader he so badly wanted to be. Maybe Master Skywalker hadn't been around long enough, but his nephew wore so many emotions and traumas on his faces. Skywalker immediately drove a wedge between master and apprentice, and waited for the two of them to sort things out. Snoke would cave, despite Sidious watching through his eyes, and Ben's crimson lightsaber would ignite, so he could finally become that new Vader. Snoke, in that moment, released Luke's cuffs, and the Jedi Master's lightsaber flipped from across the room into his hand, but it did not ignite. He paced towards his nephew, who rushed him. His saber swung widely through Luke's body, and he turned back, expecting to see a dead Jedi Master. But he missed. Skywalker evaded perfectly. His back was to Snoke, and he gave the old man a little nod and a wink just to piss him off. Rey's face illuminated in a smile, as the legend she spent a lifetime aspiring to be like took form in front of her as Luke Skywalker. Kylo continued his assault, missing every next swing he made. It was almost pointless. He couldn't do anything to land a strike on his former master. It was infuriating to Ben. Rey watched, keeping her eyes peeled on Luke and Kylo, until she spotted the Skywalker saber. It was seated right beside Snoke, and she focused with all of her energy on that weapon. The old man, Snoke, so fascinated in the Duel of Generations, didn't notice this. Luke clearly had far more experience and mastery of the Force because he wasn't even using his lightsaber in a quote-unquote duel. Rey's hands twisted inside of her cuffs. The saber next to Snoke started to turn. His eyes remained on the fight until Luke used the Force and shoved Ben through the air and into one of the Praetorians, knocking the guard off the platform to his death. Kylo slammed his blade into the ground and stumbled to his feet. Rey, at that, stopped. Snoke sensed something and looked from Luke to Rey and then back to his apprentice, Kylo. his voice roared to life as he told Kylo to strike down his true enemy once and for all, and as the last word left his mouth, the Skywalker saber ignited. The two turned in shock as Rey smiled for a moment before pulling the saber into her hand. The Praetorians activated. Rey gripped the lightsaber and cut her cuffs off, as Luke ignited his emerald saber for the first time in this duel. Kylo finally had his moment to make the difference he wanted to make, with Rey engaging a trio of guards, and the other four going after Master Skywalker. Kylo attacked his uncle again. This was the perfect opportunity to make short work of Luke Skywalker once and for all. Rey behind them held her own, and Luke, as he did with the Dark Troopers and several other foes across time, cut through the Praetorians with alarming speed and precision. Ben was quick to attack him, but his attempts were all for naught. He continued to struggle, and the guards around him dropped one by one. Luke wasn't even doing anything all that impressive either. He was years removed from even lifting a lightsaber, so most of his work was redirecting strikes into the other guards so they'd kill each other without him having to put the extra work in to kill them himself. It very quickly left Ben isolated, and while Rey was dealing with the last of her guards, Luke was giving his former apprentice the chance to surrender, to come back home, and to start again. Even if Luke knew he wouldn't be the one to save his nephew, he still had to give it a chance if he was right here, right now. But Kylo Ren's eyes were all he saw. Ben Solo was somewhere inside, tormented by killing his father, and soon to be tormented by destroying his uncle. But that would not come to fruition. With a 3-point saber combo defense, Ben was thrown to his back, and his saber was destroyed by Luke. Before Luke or Rey could say anything or do anything to him, Vice Admiral Hodo pulled a 1 in a million move against the First Order fleet and ripped through the Supremacy. The throne room was lit in a bright white light as fire coated the walls of the room. Luke helped Rey out, and before they left down the elevator, Ben, on the ground, defeated again, would watch the one person he found comfort with disappear from his life with someone he was convinced betrayed him. It was rage-inducing, but also demoralizing. Rey and Luke would find their way back to the surface with Finn, Rose, and BB-8 inside the Falcon. The First Order wouldn't send a landing party to Crait, and instead, they would retreat with the death of their supreme leader. Though there would be two immediate fallouts from this confrontation. Firstly, because Sidious was watching the throne room engagement when Snoke died, he was completely cut off from his body on Exegol, meaning the Sith were completely destroyed and now dead because Palpatine couldn't return to his deranged body. The Final Order, their massive fleet, and all of Palpatine's contingencies on Exegol were gone. All that remained was the First Order. Any potential leads to Exegol would be for nothing because there was nothing left. Secondly, because Kylo Ren, the new supreme leader of the First Order, didn't send a landing party to Crait, the Resistance survived. There were dozens of troopers that lived because of this, yet there was a bigger problem for them. Without a Battle of Crait, there was no heroic moment for Luke Skywalker, and while that doesn't sound like the biggest issue, the ripple effect was the problem. Luke's heroic last stand would have been inspiration for the galaxy, and now all they had was the Holdo maneuver, which was fine, it was great, honorable even, but a suicide by hyperspace collision wasn't quite as heroic as standing against an entire army and surviving by what people would have believed to be the case for Luke. Now the Resistance had to rebuild, Luke and Leia had to train Rey, and their forces needed transit from the now known base at Crait to another hidden location in the Outer Rim known as Ashen Claws. The Resistance War, especially without Palpatine or the First Order, dragged on. There was no end in sight because this was an Outer Rim conflict, with rare strikes at the mid-rim or core, just to keep the New Republic from forming again. People were scared, and Luke's heroic stand would have given people hope. Supreme Leader Kylo Ren was no Snoke, and he was definitely not Vader, so he became a hodgepodge of everything he learned over the years from the Empire to the beginning of the First Order. He would still find his way to Exegol, but by the time he arrived, there was nothing but rubble. Meaning that even with a full year of conflict going by, Kylo was still searching for belonging, despite having everything he thought he wanted. The First Order was still looking for a chance to become a true empire, and that, at the moment, seemed unlikely. It's not even that the Resistance had a powerful fighting force or that they were extremely effective. They were just a thorn in the side of their attempts to become something more. The Resistance had its luck though. Finn, Poe, and Rose were heroes. They were at the forefront of the war. Like the days of the rebellion, they targeted First Order bases and convoys. They had some help, like the Ghost Crew, which had of course legendary General Syndulla and her son Jason, with Ezra, Chopper, Zeb, and Kallus. Or for example, Kaz, that was always someone too. There were always people willing to fight. It just never looked like resolution was a possibility. Kylo Ren was an unstoppable force, and there was no galactic government to bring people together, so the First Order thrived on isolating planets and attacking them. For Rey, on Ahch-To though, her training was going perfectly. She bonded with both Luke and Leia a lot. Of course, Leia, because she saved herself with the Force when she was blown out of the bridge of the old flagship, the Raddus, was very ill. Every day she was growing weaker and weaker, and she would die on Ahch-To, surrounded by friends and loved ones, with the promise by Rey that she would save Ben. It was said by Luke when he and his sister first reunited on Crait that he couldn't save Ben, and while it did lead to Leia grieving for a moment, Luke reassured his sister that no one's really ever gone. He just understood that it wouldn't be he who did it. Rey was that singular someone who could bring Ben back to the light. He might face trial for his crimes against the galaxy, but just saving Ben Solo would be enough to bring peace to a dying mother. That promise put a smile on Princess Leia's face before she passed away. That mission to Rey was very important, and despite remaining out of the spotlight throughout the war because of her dedication to training on Ahch-To, she believed she was ready because of Luke. This wasn't at all like Luke thinking he was ready for Bespin after training on Dagobah. He and she were very different students, but then again, Luke and Yoda were also much different instructors. Thanks to having the Skywalker twins as her teachers, Rey was able to break down all of her lessons and learn them surprisingly quickly. It's incredible what happens when a student wants to learn and a teacher is good at teaching. That was her big thing, perhaps the biggest difference from all the Skywalkers before Rey, and also, ironically, perhaps the thing she took the most from her grandfather Sheev Palpatine. Rey had such a desire for learning, whether she was training in the Force with Luke or Leia, or using the saber with Luke, or even reading the Jedi texts late into the evenings. She was dedicated to her studies always. Of course, she wanted to be with her friends on heroic adventures and fight the First Order, but Rey had to be disciplined. She wanted to be a Jedi her entire life. She wanted to be something and someone that mattered, and she wasn't going to just pass up her opportunity at fulfilling her dream, especially because its fulfillment could save people and make the lives of those in the galactic community better. Leia's passing wasn't just a somber moment for the Resistance, but also for her son a galaxy away. Ben Solo, not Kylo Ren, was devastated. Another one of his parents was dead, and he couldn't do anything about it. He always had a strong connection with Leia. He viewed her as a pure soul, and losing that life ripped him apart. It didn't drive him further into the darkness, it brought him closer to the light. The one thing keeping Ben solidified in the dark side was his hope that he could right his wrongs with it. He just couldn't shake the feeling that he had to be a villain. But ever since he killed his father on the Starkiller, he couldn't help but feel like his every decision since leaving the Jedi was a mistake. Even fighting his uncle on the Supremacy bit him in the backside. He had traitors all around him. The First Order was literally falling apart in his hands, and everything he thought he wanted before joining Snoke felt like it meant nothing. It was devastating. So instead of a focused, determined Force user, like his opposite in the light, he was an unbalanced mess. One reflective of the Kylo Ren that lost his desperate fight to stay in the dark side on Starkiller, only now more capable of more destruction. The death of Leia Organa Solo was the turning point of the conflict. It not only saw the Resistance turning towards Luke, Lando, and Chewie for inspiration, but also turning towards Poe Dameron and Finn, who became the new generals of the Resistance. Poe knew how important it was for a former stormtrooper, his best friend, to become a general in their force. Finn's story was harrowing. but also could be extremely motivating for people uninvolved with the conflict or those who wanted to leave the First Order but didn't believe they could. It should also be said that while Finn's major accomplishment was going from sanitary stormtrooper to resistance hero, he also had the Force. He just didn't train in it yet. Luke was holding off on Finn's training temporarily because his tenure inside the First Order repressed a lot of his natural capabilities. Only now was Finn showing signs, because if he showed off a tendency to use the Force as FN-2187, then he would have been killed by the First Order. He would be trained, but not until he was fully free from the grips of the First Order. If Luke rushed his training, then Finn's training would be very similar to Sabine's from both Kanan and Ahsoka's perspective. It would be stinted until he let go of the one thing that kept him so grounded. Regardless, Rey, finally with her friends, left inside the Millennium Falcon to confront the First Order and defeat Kylo Ren. Luke decidedly didn't go. This was his Ben Kenobi moment. If Obi-Wan survived the Death Star, he would have been at the Yavin base during the assault, or at Hoth, or instead of Home 1 during Endor. His time to watch from the sidelines and help where he could had come. If they needed a great pilot, he was just a call away. This squad of Rey, Finn, Poe, Rose, and BB-8 was going to a location hinted at by a trusted source within the First Order. This was someone who aided the Resistance over the course of the past few months, and while the individual suggested that they bring all their forces to defeat the Resistance, old Rebellion heroes like Lando suggested that they go in alone. The rhetoric was far too similar to the intel the Alliance received about Endor all those years ago. They suspected a trap to crush everything the Resistance built, so taking the singular Falcon was an infinitely better idea. So, over the system of Abafar, the heroes of the Resistance arrived. Thanks to intel from their on-base historian, Yuman Kin, they knew that this location once belonged to the Separatists. They used Abafar to harvest Rhydonium during the Clone War, until a clone commando named Gregor, also known for the liberation of Lothal, attacked the droids and destroyed the mine. The First Order went back and rebuilt it, and was currently using the new mine to fuel their entire fleet. No longer did they have the massive Supremacy or Starkiller base, but resurgent destroyers and siege dreadnoughts still existed, and a majority of the First Order fleet was here. Inside the Supreme Leader's flagship, the Finalizer, he awoke from meditation. He could sense the arrival of Rey. They hadn't spoken since the Battle of Crait, but this was their chance to tie off loose ends. As per their agreement, Rey would drop herself off inside the flagship by using the Falcon's escape pod, while the rest of them searched for a potential weakness. Whatever happened, Rey knew she had to do. As long as the Supreme Leader turned, surrendered, or died, the First Order would crumble. Morale was extremely low, despite some successful conquests. The hope of a new empire looked impossible to the everyday trooper. This fight was a growingly uphill struggle for them. While Rey made her way towards her equal in the Force, the Falcon dipped through the atmosphere with a squad of TIEs trailing behind it. Poe and Chewie flew in the cockpit with Rose and Finn, firing the rear cannons at the pursuing starships. With BB-8 in the cockpit with them, they were able to locate a surge of energy, helping them find the mine itself, before trailing it and the transports carrying Rhydonium up to the main fleet. Falcon continued to bob and avoid incoming blaster shots, without allowing the TIEs to accidentally destroy the Rhydonium carrier. All the transports carrying Rhydonium were simple troop carriers, just because they were easier to use than regular shuttles, plus they had more room inside the cargo space. The Falcon, thanks to the transport, were able to destroy the following TIEs and land in the hangar bay of a carrier transport. It was a massive vessel, similar in size to an acclimator, designed for specifically carrying supplies. The First Order was preparing for the longest campaign of its short life, and they didn't want to make stops. Kylo and his council came to the conclusion that they could turn more planets against the Resistance if they simply plowed through local defenses, established tiny garrisons, and continued trotting forward. There was enough Rhydonium here to blow a hole straight through Coruscant. Oops, too soon? Bosnian Cataclysm was only a year before. With Poe and Finn leading the squad of heroes into the carrier, Rey entered the Supreme Leader's throne room. It was minuscule, didn't even come with a window, and felt cramped. Ben didn't have his helmet. He didn't recreate it because he didn't need to hide his intentions from a fake master. He could be his scarred self in front of his subordinates. He tried to reason with Rey, telling her that she could still join him, and instead of the desperation he saw when she left him on the Supremacy, he saw determination. Luke taught her well. She wouldn't be easy to break mentally. His crossguard ignited, and Rey rolled a saber staff into her hand and ignited it. Thanks to Master Skywalker, she and he not only made the kyber crystal her own, but gave it enough power to function as a saber staff without needing an additional crystal. Kylo watched her in surprise as they paced each other. Rey told him that his mother never stopped believing that he could be brought back to the light. Kylo staggered for a second, hesitating from the attack he was about to make. She could see it. He didn't want to engage, but something inside his soul was telling him to fulfill a legacy no one was expecting of him. That legacy, that pressure, destroyed him from the inside out. He swung in, as if destiny demanded that they do this dance one more time. Their blades collided. Rey played heavily into defense, trusting her instincts, and allowed Kylo to berate her with attacks. The crossguard and saber staff created a unique parry defense and jab strategy for the both of them. Rey, having used the staff throughout her life on Ahch-To, knew how to use the balance of the weapon in her favor. Kylo's attacks were pinpoint. He had the years and the experience, and even with just a little emotional imbalance, he was still focused and talented enough to pull a victory out of this. Rey played into her favor, backing away and using the small chamber to her advantage. The walls were sliced to pieces as she continued twisting her arms in a swimming motion to deflect his strikes and ranging attacks. In the cruiser just over from them, the squad rushed the main command center, with blasters blazing. Finn broke through the door to the command center first, and fired into the chests of the First Order officers that raised their blasters. Inside were prisoners, individuals suspected of treason, but none of them were General Hux. All the stormtroopers were like Finn, and all of them were ready to break free and help the present Resistance heroes. Quickly, as Poe and BB-8 went into the central console, Rose, Chewie, and Finn freed all the prisoners and set them free. They guaranteed Finn that they could get everything armed for detonation if they wanted. Poe, on the other side of the room, excitedly asked them to do it, and the troopers threw their helmets on for one last glorious day for the First Order. Finn smiled, watching them all rush out. Rose, behind him, reminded him that he was the base of their inspiration, praising his work as a Resistance general, which actually might mean more to him than just being another Jedi. Meant a lot to Finn. Rey, on the other hand, ripped her sabers backwards and out the door. Stormtroopers on either end of the corridor turned their attention and watched her roll her weapon around her back and jab down. With that, she extinguished one end of the saber, turning it into a regular blade. Kylo lunged in, stepping over her strike, only for Rey to roll out of the way. Need not forget, the man who instructed Kylo throughout his life also taught Rey. She was ready to counter. Ben's hulking strikes were hard to deal with, but staying on the balls of her feet helped with maneuverability. Behind them, the stormtroopers started taking bets on who would win. It was total chaos inside the First Order. They weren't even traitors, they were simply curious. It was something to them. Maybe it would boost their morale or whatever. Rey blocked the next strike, and Kylo swung down harder again. She sidestepped, kicking his wrist and forcing the saber out of it. Ben was able to duck the next strike and leap across the floor and grab his weapon just in time. But Rey's saber staff activated again to full length. She bashed the saber forward and back. He, who was barely off the ground, fell to his knees again and defended each strike before Rey was able to blast the crossguard out of his hand into hers, where she, again, extinguished one end of her saber. The two weapons sat just outside of his neck and formed into an X formation. She huffed for a moment, catching her breath, and he didn't even look up at her. Truthfully, he expected to be executed right here and right now. It's not like he didn't know how Vader killed Dooku. That had long been a dream of his as Kylo Ren to do to one of his foes. He just never anticipated being on the receiving end of it. Rey wasn't going to kill him though. She told him to yield, and he didn't fight that. So, as Luke did on the Supremacy, she destroyed his lightsaber and stepped away from him, keeping her blade pointed just beneath his chin. The stormtroopers were ready to kill her, but Kylo dismissed them? This was a hard moment for Ben. All of the problems he'd been avoiding were sitting right in front of him. And so, he solemnly told her that he couldn't go back. There was no place in this galaxy for him. She didn't just want to agree because she wanted him to turn to the light, so that he could face the punishment he deserved. There was no running from it, but he could at the very least give his mother the satisfaction of peace in death. Didn't that mean something to him? Well, it meant everything. Ben loved Leia. He loved his family. And that was the heartbreaking realization that he'd been neglecting since the Supremacy, since Rey validated his isolation. He loved his family, and he destroyed it. He killed Han Solo, inadvertently caused the death of Leia, and caused both of them so much pain that they ended up getting divorced. What kind of son is he to return to the fractured New Republic that he also participated in destroying? Rey reassured him, deigniting her saber and lightly putting her hand on his shoulder. He was a son that could do right, the son that could finish a legacy of pain with another redemption, another acceptance that the light triumphs above it all. A tear slipped down his cheek and he nodded. At the same time, a communication from Poe and Finn came in. They couldn't remotely trigger the detonation of the Rhydonium. She could hear a firefight in the background. The traitor troopers were firing into the ranks of the regulars, and they were outnumbered. Finn told Rey that he was sorry that they didn't have more time. He knew that she'd have a bright future as the pride of Luke's new order. She didn't understand what he meant, it was so chaotic, but Finn confirmed that he would make his final sacrifice here. He would pull what they call a heavy. He would take every last stormtrooper and the First Order down with him. He could do it. He could get them all out of here and he could make it right. Before Rey could choke up or even respond, Ben's voice broke through the crack in his suffering, and he told them to wait. He told them again to wait. Before telling them to get out of here, he would be the one to do it. He would destroy the fleet. At least he could make all the suffering he caused worth something. Finn and Poe on the other ship didn't hesitate. Worthwhile sacrifice, see ya, pal. They were absolutely willing to sacrifice Kylo Ren for this, and that was a mutual agreement. Rey looked down at Ben with her hand still on his shoulder and asked if he was sure because she would do it herself if she needed to, and he admitted that he had never been more sure about anything in his life. He'd rise from his knees and they'd embrace in a hug, long enough to heal a part of him that had been lifeless since he became a Jedi. At that, he turned around and walked away. Rey grabbed the kyber crystal inside of his old saber and left. By the time the Falcon was preparing for hyperspace, they'd be able to see the ignition of the Rhydonium. Ben Solo didn't have any heroic or inspiring final words, he just went in silence. But so did his mother, who waited so patiently for him. Her body disappeared the moment he did. Ben never felt the fire nor the explosion. He was brought directly into the netherworld of the Force by Leia. She saved his soul after he made the change she knew he always could make. Luke on Agen Kloss felt this, and dispatched the Resistance fleet, knowing what had happened. They'd arrive at Abafar to clean up the remnants of the First Order, and finish off and win the rest of the Civil War. Following the destruction of the First Order would be the rebirth of the New Order. The Republic wouldn't be reborn, but the Core Parliament, the Mid and Inner Rim Coalition, and the Outer Rim Confederacy would be. They'd all be separate, independent governments, determined to fix what the Empire and Old and New Republics failed at. In the future, decades down the line, they'd eventually gradually unite. And they also did keep war far away from their governance. Rey, upon her return to Agen Kloss with the help of Luke, would purify Ben's kyber crystal. That, along with the crystal that powered her lightsaber and Leia's Jedi weapon, the two of them, Rey and Luke that is, would travel across the stars to Naboo, so that the lightsaber crystals belonging to Anakin, Leia, and Ben could be buried with their wife, mother, and grandmother. Luke believed that Naboo would be the place of peace for all of them. At their burial, though, he would call Rey the next generation of Skywalker. Leia would have done it herself had she stayed alive, but Luke knew that he needed to wait for the perfect moment to do it himself. Now was that moment, with the entire family gathered around. Far from sight, the Force ghosts of Leia, Ben, and Anakin watched over fondly and proudly. The Jedi Order, as a result, was reborn, with a new name. Rey called it the Skywalkers, in honor of the name she was gifted by her new family, the one that cared about her, the one that accepted her. She didn't need to be a Palpatine because of blood. She already proved that she was more than her grandfather could ever be. Among the first members of the Skywalker Order was Finn. It would take time, and the old Jedi texts would be kept for lessons, but not for undying loyalty. The Jedi were good for what they did, but this new order could evolve. Thanks to Luke, his transparency, and Rey's determination, that was completely possible. The Resistance formed into a protective military shared by the three major governments in the galaxy, forcing the actual military to be representative of all three coalitions. Poe, Rose, and Finn sometimes played major roles in this formation. Poe became the true successor to General Organa by doing this. And Luke, after everything he failed at, and gained, and even lost again, found his peace with the new Jedi Order, grown out of good old Lothal. It was a peaceful world with strong roots. Ezra helped Rey pick the location, but for Luke, it was everything he could ever hope for. He'd spend the rest of his life amusing younglings, telling heroic stories, and, like his successor, being remembered as a true hero to the whole galaxy. And that, my friends, is our story, and special thanks to all the patrons for supporting the channel. Smash that like button. Seth Clone Wars out on Saturday. You know the deal by this point. Let's talk about this story. This story was really meant to be like a kind of a bridge between Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, and a little bit of Duel of the Phases in there. Obviously, I used the Satele Shan clips because I thought it would look cooler. Just kind of doing it for the cool aesthetic. You know, she's using a saber staff, so I mean, it's on screen. You can see it on screen. That's the whole point of that. But as for everything else, like story-wise, I thought it'd be fun for Luke to kind of have this turnaround moment. And Luke truly is Ben Kenobi. That is the whole point of his arc in Last Jedi. So this is just him kind of following up with that and not dying. Like it'd be like if Ben Kenobi survived A New Hope and then he went to Bespin with Luke and then also fought Darth Vader. Obviously a little bit different. Luke is much more powerful than Ben Solo is, but it's still kind of that same little dynamic. But I thought it'd make more sense for Luke to fill that Ben Kenobi role going forward. I talk about this sometimes, but I think Rey would really thrive with two teachers. She's just probably the most determined of the Skywalkers to learn. She's just like super into it. Luke gets that way after Endor, but Anakin is definitely not there, and Leia obviously stops being a Jedi at some point. So I think her, especially as we see her in the trilogy, she's determined to learn. I think her being determined to learn and having both Luke and Leia, which is kind of two sides of the same coin kind of thing, I think she'd really thrive from that. I think she would benefit from that as well. I also kind of like this idea where Kylo is a little bit more damaged in this one. He's definitely a little bit more emotionally damaged, and I think that leads to him being so remorseful, but also so kind of like hesitant and even allowing the First Order morale to kind of fall apart. Because like I believe in the comics after Last Jedi, there's like these huge conquests and so forth, and while they exist in this timeline, they don't really make the morale go boom. So it kind of doesn't do anything for them. It's just like, oh, we attacked that place. So I hope you all enjoyed the story. Got a couple cool duels in there, got rid of Snoke pretty easily. I thought that kind of throne room sequence was kind of a cool way to pay homage to the Last Jedi sequence while also doing something different with it. But I hope you all enjoyed. I love you all, spread the love, and always, my friends, may the Force be with you.